E allora siamo per iniziare, chiamo ovviamente...
We're about to get started, so I would call all of the speakers and the moderators to take to their seats so as to allow us to get started in just a few minutes.
E Fiorenza Sarzanini.
Fiorenza Sarzanini, I saw her in the audience. I would like to invite her to come here to the podium.
Tra l'altro tra pochi istanti partirà anche la diretta.
And in just a few seconds, we will have the live streaming on Radio Radicale. And this is going to be a very fruitful and very rich in themes day.
Sta arrivando Fiorenza. Eccoci.
Good morning to all of you, and many thanks for being here in the first place. Thank you to Deputy Director of the Corriere della Sera, Mr. Sanzanini, who will help us during this first part of the day entitled La forza delle donne, and she will be also contributing. Many thanks for hosting us here to the European Institution headquarters in Rome, and many thanks to the European Parliament. And today we have with us the Director of the European Parliament in Italy, Carlo Corazza, and I would like to have him immediately have the microphone so as to break ice at the very beginning of this long day. So many thanks. In the first place, let me greet with the greatest affection Emma Bonino, and I've had the great honor of working with her for 5 years, and I still wonder how she could stand me for that long. And many thanks to Valeria Manieri and Fiorenza Sarzanini. I'm so happy and very much pleased that you decided to organize this very important event in our own headquarters. Today is the International Day of Fundamental Rights. And in these days, we have it under our eyes. We have thousands of young women who are risking their own life, and they are demonstrating in the streets in Afghanistan. And we've seen the courage of Belarus women, and every day, on a daily basis, we see how many women are fighting for their own rights. They are fighting not just for themselves, but also for our own sake, for the sake of a world which is safer and more prosperous, and the women who are victims of violence, of forced marriage, excluded from the economic world and from the labor world, are in the very end a source of stability. They are definitely victims of the fear of man because of their own potential. Now, this sort of fear is exactly what gives rise to such a violence. And I am more than proud of representing this conference here today. Our institution has always been in the forefront in protecting and safeguarding the rights of women. And together with us, we have the FAM organization fighting on an all-year-round basis for the rights of women. We asking for the reception of the Istanbul Convention, and I would like to just recall a few passages which were important for the fights. Now, the Belarus opposition, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who will be online today giving a message to us, and Veronica, who received the Sakharov Award from the European Parliament for the freedom of thought and the fight and struggle for the defense of human rights, but also the many young women fighting for the right to have an education. Murad Aman Bashar, they have been sexual slaves, they have been persecuted by ISIS, and then for the many lawyers fighting for the rights of women victims of violence, and another woman who was sentenced 10 years of jail in Iran. There are so many women, and I could still read a very long list of names, but I think that this is to make us understand something which is of paramount importance. And many years ago, when I was working with Emma Bonino, she used to say that we are using much more the market than the currency. I initially did not understand this kind of reference, which didn't look like quite obvious. But as a matter of fact, our genetic code, which is what allows us to live together, is the common vision of human beings, because we are focusing on the dignity of the human person. And without this, there would never be a European Union. So the most important thing that we have to do is exactly to protect and defend within the European Union and outside the European Union the fundamental rights. And the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, is always providing her constant support to all women who are now fighting for their rights today. And once again, many thanks for this very important meeting. Now, many thanks, Gianfranco Dell'Alba. Yes, let me just celebrate this initiative. I'm very proud that together with No C'è Pace Without Justice, we gave rise to this event, the strength of women, because we've been working for the past 30 years within the field of international justice, and we promote it. We promote democracy and human rights with a very specific focus, a very special one on violence against women. Emma Bonino was launching together with us within the European Parliament more than 20 years ago a campaign against the genital mutilation of women, and we shall hear later on a very important message with regard to this aspect. And There is no peace without justice is really helping us know the many struggles that are being fought, and we shall hear many important testimonies from Afghanistan, the Amazon, the Rohingya, and the many more testimonies coming from the Arab world, from Iran, because there are really many struggles where we try and battles where we try and help and be of some help, because our campaigns wanted to go straight to the heart of the matter, that is, violence against women is violence against the society at large. And only too often the repression of women is one of the benchmarks with which a regime is sort of protecting itself and also is gaining ground while holding power. And we've seen this in Iran, we are still seeing this in Iran, where there are ongoing demonstrations, and that is after a woman was killed because and murdered because she wasn't really wearing appropriately the veil, for not abiding by the dress code. And we shall hear much more today from Afghanistan, which is where, once again, the Taliban regime is imposing through the oppression of women. And this is an oppression which is defined as a gender apartheid. So they impose on women their own power. And once again, I won't steal any more valuable time from you. And I'm so happy that this initiative could take place just a few days before December the 10th, which is the worldwide day celebrating the worldwide rights and human rights. And we shall hear many more testimonies, interesting testimonies in the course of our day. Many thanks to Gianfranco Dell'Alba. Just a few more words, because as we all know, the agenda is very dense and rich in contributions. We are happy, so happy of having organized this initiative together with No Peace. There is no peace without justice. Many thanks for the support to Plus Europe, because it's been a long time for Emma Bonino and Plus Europe being involved in any such themes in foreign policies and human rights and female rights. Then we shall hear more from her directly. But then we also have a very much varied network, a much lively one, I would say, which tries to do things together with other groups, whether organized or not, and sometimes they're not organized, and if that's the case, they try and set up coordinations or to facilitate the establishing and the setting up of the outreach campaigns. And the theme of the strength of women, which is what we are focusing on today, is what is stimulating us from many viewpoints. Gianfranco was saying this exactly a few moments ago, and I think that this is going to be the main topic of this day. And the body of women, the freedom of women, the civic rights and civilian rights of women are the very lens through which we have to read the state of democracies worldwide. And this is also true in Europe and also at the borders of Europe. And even more so, this is even very much important to reason upon these things nowadays, because we need to understand what Italy and what Europe want to do with others and for the others, not just for ourselves. And we shall hear a number of testimonies coming from many women from Afghanistan, Iran, Belarus, Ukrainian women, Russian residents, women from the Amazon and the Philippines. So we'll be really traveling across the world of women, but we will also touch upon very important political themes. I'm so happy that the day is going to be concluded by a political panel, because the very objective and the very goal of this day is not only understanding what is the state of the art in this field, but also what political tools do we have in order to make the difference. And this is where I will stop, and I will thank you. And now I'll pass the floor to Fiorenza Sarzanini. I would like to thank the Deputy Director of Corriere della Sera, but I would now ask to have the video be launched. Good morning to everyone, and many thanks for being here once again. Most of all, thank you for making me be here. And to me, this truly is a great honor. And this is a very important day. And I believe that this is an important day mostly because of what happened in the very last hours in Iran. Because the announcement that was given of the elimination of moral police, which in the end was just a propaganda announcement, makes us understand how high we have to keep our guard and our attention, especially in the Western world, with respect to any such situations, which, if left in total darkness, could entail many more consequences, more severe consequences. And yesterday, while checking once again the agenda of today, I also received a message from Emma Bonino and the presentation that Emma Bonino delivered yesterday for this very event. And Emma said something which is fundamental in her own contribution. She says that the violence against women in the public life is ever more under the spotlights. Women are more and more asking of not being excluded from decision-making processes. And to me, especially because of my own profession, being under the spotlight for these women is of paramount importance, because in events like this one, which bring together different capacities, different worlds, different nations, well, they should represent an appointment, because everyone and each one of us, because of their own activities, should not allow for the spotlights to be switched off, especially with regard to the protest of women. And I would never want to say protest, but I would rather say the rightful claim of women claiming their own rights, simple rights, rights that are acknowledged and recognized in different states, which instead in other states, these days, turn into a fight. So we have to keep the spotlights on this so as to allow them not to be a battle to gain rights, but rather something that belongs to normal everyday life. And I yesterday was reading about men in Iran flogging kneeled women, and I hope that I shall never see, that no one will ever see again any such images. And now that we would like to pass the floor to Emma Bonino. Yes. Thousand thanks to all of you from the deepest of my heart. Sincerely. Thank you to all of you. And let me say that I was really very much fond of this event because of very special reasons. In part because I'm strongly irritated by the idea of the fact that today I'm demonstrating or taking sides for Ukrainian women, next day for Iranian women. On the third day, I try and have the Yazidi women being never forgotten. And I think that apart from our own specificities, community specificities, there is a red line which keeps us all together, which is known as freedom. That's it. I believe that this is the common thread that keeps us together, the common theme that keeps us together, each one of us having our own projects and missions, but freedom is the leading line, is the leading theme that keeps us all together. And this to me is something that comes automatic. Sometimes I even have to go back in time and think when I was with Marta Lassou at the ministry, and whenever visiting other countries, the officers would prepare you a very thick file and dossier. the GDP, the number of inhabitants, and I always, on any such occasions, asked to know what was the female situation, because I was convinced, and still am convinced, that that is a very fundamental indicator. Not just the only one, but there are many more, but that is an indicator of the state of freedom of women enjoyed by the women in that specific country. That's an important hallmark of development, of progress. And I will obviously be paying great attention to the different contributions. I'm not coming from outer space, thinking that maybe there are most of all rights and only rights, but I think that defending rights is a process in our countries, just like in your countries. And if we do not feed this activity, if we do not support this activity, one day you'll wake up and you'll no longer have this right and freedom, things that we could never conceive, things that we would have never thought could ever happen in Europe, for example. So I strongly hope that out of this meeting today, what will be existing is going to be a willingness to get together, to be coordinated, to take part in events and demonstrations, even if they're not just decidedly Ukrainians or pro-Ukraine, or maybe just pro-Iranian women, because I do believe that united we stay and we are strong. So I believe that this is the attempt that we are today suggesting, because the strength of women should never get lost or be lost and should never be forgotten, but rather should be strengthened on a daily basis, day after day. Today we will be spending a whole day together, but I was very, very convinced, and I still am convinced, to have an event uniting all types of women and bringing them together. Now, there is also another theme, which is the theme of forced marriages and baby spouses. And I think that this is a worldwide problem. It exists also in Italy. And this is already supported by a very important network, girls known as Girls Not Brides, which is, amongst the many disgraces, also allowing for rape. Because how could you else say that there is a girl, age 9, who is forced to marry a man, age 35, whom she's never seen before? And although he's promising that he won't touch her before the age of 14. This is obviously something that will never happen. But this is a theme that we will touch upon on a different occasion. I just wanted to mention it because it's part of our own reflections. And I know that tomorrow there is an initiative conducted in the Senate of Italy known as No Longer Slaves. And if I will be invited, I will take part in that, because traditional slavery is something which is a horror. But the slavery of children and girls means that you are authorizing rape, because this is something that we should never forget nor disregard. So I do hope that in the afternoon, but also now, I believe there are going to be speakers from the European Parliament taking the floor, and I do hope that all of your testimonies are going to be making them more willing to, for example, have in the lower chamber a true commission set up for human rights and dealing with human rights. And this is also going to push us, not just us, but also and women who are supporting themselves, because this means that we have to try and bring everyone in any such efforts, even men. There are some tools. For example, the International Criminal Court are adequate tools to use to try and solve problems and issues like this. I think that we are now cherishing a new idea which is leading us towards a new Nuremberg. I do disagree with that, because Nuremberg was the trial of winners against defeated and the ones who lost. In order to organize a treaty, you need years, many years, lots of years, that then you need to go through the ratification and approval stage. But there is one imperfect tool known as International Criminal Court, and I believe that that's where we should make more endeavors. That's what we should strengthen. And with the court of former Yugoslavia, we could turn rape into a war tool, a war weapon, and that was acknowledged and recognized. So maybe we should try and strengthen and support the tools that we already have available, instead of reinventing hot water and then go back to square one time after time. Many thanks for your attention.
Next up is Pina Picerno, Deputy Speaker of the European Parliament, who has a video message for us. Good morning, everyone. I really thank No Peace Without Justice, Più Europa, and everyone for inviting me and for organizing this very important event. And I would like to say hello to Emma Bonino, Miss Emma Bonino. Today's session will be crucial to set an institutional agenda that can truly transpose the stimuli that come from all over the world and our country. To set an institutional agenda means no longer tackling the rights of women, this issue in a rhetorical way, as we typically do. We know that there is still a lot to be done, and this is possible through public policies and through the institutions we represent. It's possible to overturn the collective imagination, the collective picture, and truly reverse the situation, because there are huge gaps to be bridged. We live in a situation in which the only movements that really got history going again were, on the one hand, a sort of revanchism of some authoritarian regimes. Think of Putin's Russia, for example, and the struggle of women in the West. And all over the world. I'm thinking of Iran and Afghanistan. All this is required in order for democracy to advance. Now we go back in time, in history. The second movement, the second struggle I mentioned, is the only possible revolution that can still be enforced in order for millions of women in the world to have their rights acknowledged, their rights to equality. There is no doubt as to which part of the history we are on, based on the democratic and mandate that has been entrusted with us on a European and international level. We can take action. We can no longer sit in the middle. It is up to us to support this part of history and head with great resolve towards the future. In this regard, we must make an effort in order to focus on issues such as freedom and rights of women and put them at the core of our activities. Because if it is true, on the one hand, the revolution of the new century is about women, it can no longer be considered an attachment of institutional activities, as if it were isolated. This issue is crosses all other issues, human rights, equality, foreign policy, security, defense, migration, economic growth and progress democratic progress in the West and across the world, social rights, labor rights, all these issues represent the modern world we must face, and they speak one single language, the language of women. The commitment of the European Parliament in this regard is very, very strong, but then again, in Brussels, we know that we can do even more. The coordination we have with national parliaments and international institutions is still insufficient, in my opinion. There still are misunderstandings when it comes to balances between European and national institutions. And this means we often settle for the minimum, whereas we could really aim a lot higher. But I think we should aim higher. And there is no better context than this to address the issues we are addressing today. That's how we can aim high. And this is not just about Europe. I'm thinking of European countries that have been set back in terms of progress on women's rights. But Europe must be at the forefront in this regard. But we still don't bear full responsibility. But that means we must preserve and promote the rights of women across the world. We must constantly shed light on international relations in order to conquer not square kilometers of land, but to conquer more freedom. That's what international relations should be about. Following the great focus on trade of the past decades, now we are focusing more on values and on sharing values, and women are becoming more and more the focal point of all this. We can no longer adopt the business-as-usual approach. We need to properly support freedom movements across the world. We must help governments overcome this backward approach to solve the issue of violence. It will be up to the European Parliament of our institutions to do all this. So I do thank you very much for this opportunity, for giving me the opportunity to give you this message, and I wish you a fruitful session. Thank you. You might want to forgive me if I get my pronunciation wrong. The interpreters might be able to correct me. I will now roll the video message of the leader of the Belarusian democratic movement, Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya, whom, according to some independent observers, actually won the presidential elections on the 9th of August 2020 in her race against President Lukashenko. We can show the video.
Dear friends, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this community. I want to thank the European Union representation in Italy. No peace without justice. Le Contemporanee and Più Europa for keeping the women of Belarus in focus. All of us here fight for a more equal, free and just world. Today I want to tell you some stories about the brave women of Belarus who inspire me. Ordinary women who, like me, lived a normal life before our peaceful revolution started. Who, like me, were happy with simple things in life like a child's success in school or a good movie. I want to tell you some stories that capture the essence of our female strength and courage. Let me start with Masha, Maria Kolesnikova, my friend. A few days ago, she was secretly moved to hospital to the intensive care unit. But before that, she had spent 10 days in the inhuman conditions of a punishment cell, in total isolation. From prison, despite pressure and torture, she found the strength to write an inspiring letter to us, who are living in freedom. She even used her red lipstick in the prison cell, as she has done during the mass protests, and she inspired Belarusian women to resist. Let me tell you another story about Alena Malinovskaya. Alena is a highly experienced breastfeeding specialist. But now she's a prisoner in a maximum security penal colony, where the regime sentenced her to 4 years of drawing the national emblem of Belarusian on a wall. And while in prison, while under constant torture and psychological pressure, Alena continues to do her job. In letters from prison, she advises young mothers on feeding issues and comforting them. It is an incredible example of human strength, isn't it? Another story is about Halina Derbish, a pensioner from a small agricultural town. Halina has been an independent observer in every election in Belarus for 15 years, and she repeatedly reported violations at polling stations. But of course, year after year, her message of truth was ignored. But after 2020, the regime decided to criminalize any manifestation of civic activity in Belarus. During the hunt for observers, Halina was declared as a terrorist and sentenced to 20 years in prison. In her letters to her children, she says that in the colony they call her our terrorist grandmother. And there are so many others. All my life I admired the brave heroines in our history, Belarusian women partisans, activists of the Belarusian national movement. And learning about them, I was wondering, where did they get so much strength from? And I can answer this question myself. When the time comes, the strength comes. It appears out of nowhere. I know it because this happened to me when my husband was sent to prison on fake charges. I saw the danger to my family and to my children's futures. And in one moment, the strength I needed to resist was suddenly with me. When I think about women's protests in Belarus, I often remember one image. I saw it on video of peaceful protests and it caught my attention. In this video, I saw two sides of Belarus meet at the crossroads in Minsk. Hundreds of thousands of free and proud Belarusians who had finally got tired of being afraid, said no to tyranny and violence on one side. On the other, thousands of the regime's fighters who trained with weapons and fired water cannons against unarmed protesters. Between them, in the middle of these crossroads, there was a woman in a white waistcoat. On her chest was written "Mom," and on her back, "Grandma." And right at her feet, stun grenades crashed. She stood motionless and stared the security officers in the eyes. She wasn't afraid of gunshots. And when I saw her on the video, I realized what the sign on her waistcoat really said. It says, "Mothers are not afraid of anything, even of death. In the future of the children is threatened." As I said, all these stories are about ordinary Belarusian women, women who shield the bodies of their men to save them from fatal shots. Women who put themselves into police wagons to take the place of someone else. Female doctors, threatened with reprisals, wrote reports on the torture in order to save evidence for fair future trials. Women lawyers who found the courage to walk into police stations and prisons with their heads held high. They came to argue against those who live outside the law and feel total impunity. Today, the regime in Belarus still lives outside the law. It still feels its impunity whilst it continues to torture and terrorize innocent civilians. Over 200 Belarusian women are imprisoned on absurd and random accusations. The number of political prisoners in Belarus has almost reached 1,500. And those people are kept in inhuman conditions, in the cold, without warm clothes and bed linen, without a shower and basic hygienic products, without the right to correspond or meet with their relatives. But they stay strong. None of them gave up. We know this when we receive rare letters from them, and through their words we understand that we too can never give up. In 2020, I discovered strength in myself. Many Belarusian women discovered strength in themselves that we didn't know we had. It just came to us at the right moment. And the incredibly brave women of Ukraine seem to have discovered this strength too. They fearlessly fight the war alongside their men for their land and for justice and for the future of their families. It was found too by the brave women of Iran who fight fearlessly for their human rights and dignity. And I believe that at the decisive moment, each of us can find this strength and become a soldier of the light against the darkness, of freedom against oppression. This decisive moment has come. It has come for the whole democratic world. And we must be together in this fight. And we need more soldiers of freedom. Today, I invite you to think of those stories of women's resistance that inspire you. And with their inspiration, discover new strength in ourselves. Stand for justice and for democracy, for the future of all our children. Stand with Belarus. Stand with Ukraine.
Grazie per questa.
Thank you for this video. We now welcome all the guests of this panel, which is about fulfilling change. And the first change is participation, attention. We must not think that supporting women across the world who fight for their right means protesting, rallying with them. Actually, I think that the real difference, the real change is networking, taking tangible measures. Taking to the streets is one of the measures, but not the only one. Because it is important to rally, to take to the streets, but it is also important to create pathways through which we can channel the attention of the rest of the world in order to implement tangible initiatives, in order for these women to have their rights acknowledged. I'm thinking of what has been done for Afghan women, including through projects that help them do their work, what they used to do in their country elsewhere. So rallying is good, but alone it's not enough. It's pointless. We must all be more and more aware, but we have to build, not only protest. And I would like to talk about this, again, forgive my pronunciation, with Sadaf Dashti, an Afghan woman, Deputy Director of Rawadari, an organization which deals with the preservation and promotion of the culture of human rights in Afghanistan. The final goal is that of curbing the suffering of all Afghans, with a particular focus on women and girls. What we were saying is actually being implemented in a way, because this activism is heads for the outside. It outreaches, taking into account what happens in the country, but it also reaches to the outside, being convinced that real change can derive from the change of the Afghan society. Rawadari follows IHRC, the national institutions that for 20 years was the beacon for human rights in Afghanistan, but it was then dissolved by the Taliban in 2022. Over to you.
Thank you for providing this opportunity for all of us to come together and celebrate the strength of women globally. It's a great opportunity, and I would like to thank all the organizers of this event. I'm pleased to be part of the discussion today, and I feel close bond of solidarity with all the women present in this room and women globally, because we share some common challenges, but we also have the opportunity to celebrate womanhood and strength. As we are sitting here today, Afghanistan is facing one of the worst humanitarian and human rights crises. And women and girls are wiped out from all social and public spheres like no other country in the world. The situation in Afghanistan is very unique by itself. Since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan on 15th of August 2021, Afghan women have been the face of the non-armed resistance in the country. They have marched on the streets. They have faced the gunpoint of one of the most dangerous groups in the world. And they have risked in a situation where there was no justice system in place, and the only force was the force of power and gun. They risked their lives and the lives of their families. I'm representing a small human rights organization called Rawadari. Rawadari is a Dari or Persian word, which means you wish the same for others as you wish for yourself. It means tolerance. It's an organization of Afghan human rights activists, as it was mentioned by my colleague, that are in exile now, but they have continued to collect evidence of what's happening on the ground. The findings of Rawadari shows that women have been arrested and killed for participating in protests in Afghanistan. So according to the findings of Rawadari, 73 women have been arrested, 70 have been killed, 9 have disappeared just for participating in non-armed peaceful protests against the Taliban. The Taliban group arrested and detained 7 women protesters in an armed raid in their house. 40 protesting women in Mazar-e-Sharif were arrested by Taliban. 8 of them were killed mysteriously for organizing this protest. In addition, some women have been killed because they were engaged or they were employees of the former government. On 4th of September 2021, a former prison employee in the Ghor province of Afghanistan was killed in front of her children and husband for working with the former government. 2 other women in Ghazni and Mazar-e-Sharif province were killed for the same reason. The violent suppression of a woman and women protests have created an atmosphere of fear, and it's closing the arena for these women, and they need all the support so their voices are not cut off and they are heard globally. In addition to what's happening there, there's insecurity and target attacks on minorities. This also includes women. What happened on the 13th of September 2022 in Kaj, an educational institute who was preparing women to go for the entrance exam at the university, was devastating. And suicide bomber came in and exploded himself among the group of girls who were trying to take the exam. The target was women, all of them young and trying to go to university with a lot of hope. The situation is challenging. Since the inception, Taliban have numbered a number of decrees and orders to limit the basic human rights of women and girls. They have banned the girls from secondary education. Women cannot leave the house without a male guardian or mahram in the local language. They cannot go to the gym. They cannot go to the park. They cannot benefit from health services without being accompanied by a man. They cannot go to university with colorful scarf. Even if they have the full Islamic hijab and clothing, it shouldn't be of certain color, they should all look black. And the cab drivers are banned from accepting women passengers without appropriate hijab. The public baths, which is still a tradition in Afghanistan due to economic circumstances and tradition, is also banned for women. TV presenters have to cover their faces to appear on TV. And so many other such decrees have been issued. These are some examples. All these have caused women already had their existing challenges like any other country in the world. It has added to that. So there's increased domestic violence because there is no justice system in place where women can go to. All the women's shelters are closed. The Ministry of Women Affairs is dissolved. The Afghanistan Human Rights Independent Commission is dissolved. There's no system in place, and institutions that can provide support are all wiped out. So I would say, imagine being a woman in Afghanistan. Life should be suffocating. There are increased suicide cases. There's increased domestic violence. There is increase in child marriages, and there is increase in forced marriages in the country. So these are some of the problems. What can we do about it? There are many things we can do about it. But from my personal experience, what can empower women in the first place is education. And what can disempower women is also education. If you take the right to education from women, you take everything from them. So using the modern technology today, it's different. We can access, we have access. We should use all of us together, the international actors, the private actors. We should help the girls to have access to education and have access to knowledge. And I believe knowledge is power. We shouldn't leave these girls to be powerful. I'm 35 years old, and I have been a primary school student in the first term of Taliban. My mother was a school teacher. She opened a secret school in the first term of Taliban to help us, we were 3 sisters, to continue to study and help all the other girls in our community. And this secret school, she called her colleagues from her school and said, let's do this. The others were also paying a bit of fees so she could support us economically because she didn't have any income. And it worked for some years on that time. I studied grade 4 and 5th, and later on, when the situation got more challenging, we had to go to Pakistan to continue education. I have been through this, what Afghan girls are being through now in the past. Unfortunately, the bad history is repeating itself. The only thing which empowered me was education. And I think coming together, having the network like this is very important. And also the stories of the Afghan girls, the stories of resistance and the stories of resilience should be heard, and they shouldn't be forgotten. Thank you.
Grazie mille.
1,000 thanks. And now I'd like to invite here to the podium Simona Lanzoni, Deputy President of Pangea Onlus. Okay, here she is. And then next, I'd like to have Sharabano Aidari, Deputy President of the Association for Solidarity of Afghan Women. And again, I can't spot her in the room. And Lina Al-Hatlul, Coordinator of the Monitoring and Communication Unit with Alquist for Human Rights. And if she's here, Kegi Koita, President of La Palabre from Senegal. I think she's here. There she comes. And Rosanna Oliva, the Network for Equal Rights, Rete per la Parità in Italy, and Nadia Volkova, the activist for human rights in Kiev, Ukraine. I hope, or I wonder whether she has already arrived. She is online. Very well. So, in the first place, I would like to pass the floor to Simona Lanzoni, Deputy President of Pangea Onlus, member of Grevio, that is the expert group monitoring for the implementation of the Istanbul Convention with the Council of Europe, and coordinator of the CEDAW platform, which is a network of Italian associations reporting on the state of discrimination against women with the CEDAW committee within the United Nations. In the first place, good morning, everyone. And thanks to Les Contemporaines and There is No Peace Without Justice. Many years I came across with No Peace Without Justice in Afghanistan because they were conducting a huge work in the field of the regaining of civil criminal rights in a country that needed to be rebuilt or built anew. And here we are back to square one. We are doing this. So our Pangea Foundation works in Afghanistan, but also in Italy, where the rights of women are not yet on an equal footing. Sometimes they are contemplated by the laws, but there is a hiatus, there is a gap in the implementation of some laws. So once again, many thanks for focusing and bringing back women's rights under the spotlight. And in recent years, we've seen that they are strongly under attack, all of these women's rights. So we need to have awareness. There needs to be awareness of women's rights in all fields, I would say, especially if I think of, in terms of reproductive sexual women's rights, violence against women, women in situations of war and conflict, the possibility of handling and managing, thanks to some available tools, because sometimes the tools are available. For example, I'm thinking of the many resolutions that fall into the agenda of women, peace and security and safety, so as to allow women to take the floor and take upon themselves active roles, because women do have such active roles. They play them and they perform them, but they are not acknowledged, nor sometimes recognized, especially within any such spheres where, or situations in which only too often we allow men to take the floor and to speak out their mind. But unfortunately, in this participation effort, as Emma Bonino said, we need to have a networking activity to allow words to become visible, especially the words of women, and to allow what they do on a daily basis to appear, to be manifest, and to be known. And I'm saying this because I'm working in war contexts, in conflict areas, where you have to start from yourself. You have to go back to yourself, and that means that you are heading for difficulties. We are in a moment when, once again, we should focus on women and put them under the spotlight. And I, once again, agree on the setting up of a two-chamber committee dealing with human rights and women's rights within the Parliament and Senate, as well as a roundtable, a permanent roundtable within the Foreign Ministry. Because the many associations, the many women who are active for the progress of the rights and advancement of human rights in general and of female rights more in particular, only too often we can't find the right context, the right frameworks, the right ones that allow for the networking activities that in turn allow us to bring forward and further develop any such issues and themes. So it is of paramount importance to do networking with the so-called diaspora women. It is high time to do that. That's part of the process of time. That is part of what we're going through. Nowadays, we do recognize ourselves, and only too often each one of us has her own agendas, programs, priorities. But I nonetheless believe that it is of paramount importance and fundamental, because there are women such as the Afghan women or the women of the Sahel region, who've been in a situation of war and conflict for so many years, and they are the ones who can tell us much more. The sharing of practices probably is what allows us to advance, to make progress, because it is not sure that we in the Western world are the most advanced ones. So I believe that this initiative is of paramount importance, and I do hope that we will be in a position to allow for more networking in order to respond to the backlash focusing on rights of women, which is an ongoing and has been an ongoing situation for some years, and which has brought us to confront ourselves with situations that we would have never think we would have to rediscuss once again and to deal with once again. So it is of fundamental importance to go back and talk about these things, even sometimes in a cross-sectional manner amongst across different cultures, because this is what allows us to grow, all of us, together at the same time. And here we have to include men, especially if we want to have a true transformation, which is gender transformation. The floor to Arbano Idari. No, then Lina Al-Atnul. Spero che mi possiate.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll remove the translation because otherwise I'll get confused. So hello everyone. I'm honored to be amongst you all. I am Lina Al-Hadloul. I am from Saudi Arabia. I am the sister of Lujain Al-Hadloul. My sister was, I don't know, a women's rights activist. She was the leader of the Women to Drive campaign, because in Saudi Arabia, women couldn't drive before 2018. She got imprisoned for that 3 times before the last imprisonment. And she was also trying to dismantle the male guardianship system in Saudi Arabia, which basically considers women as minors till the end of their lives. She was also in the process of opening a shelter for women who are victims of domestic abuse, because in Saudi Arabia, when you're a victim of domestic abuse, you are sent to what is called a care home, which is basically a prison. So she wanted a real shelter. And so in 2018, after she was at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and she got back to the Middle East. And once she got back to the Middle East, so basically in Dubai, she used to live there, she got kidnapped from the streets of Dubai. She was sent back to Saudi Arabia. She was forcibly disappeared for a couple of days, and then she was released. And that was in the context of when Mohammed bin Salman rose to power, and he was basically trying to reform the country. And so after that, when she got released, she got a call from the royal court saying that women will be allowed to drive and that she shouldn't be mentioning anything or commenting anything about it, which she did. I mean, she stayed silent. But still, in May 2018, what we call the secret police or the state security broke into our house in Saudi, in Riyadh, the capital. They forcibly took my sister Lujain. She was forcibly disappeared for a month. And then we got a call saying, she was saying that she is not in an official prison. She is in what she used to call a hotel. Months later, we found out that basically this hotel is a torture facility. So for months, she was being tortured. I don't know if you want details, but basically she was electrocuted, flogged, sexually harassed, waterboarded, force-fed, deprived of sleep, all because of her activism, basically. And then when she got back to the official prison, she was given her official charges, which explicitly mention the fact that she's an activist, that she was in contact with the Human Rights Watch, with Amnesty, that she was in contact with the EU, which made the EU quite active in my sister's case because, they saw that this is an official charge to be in contact with the EU. And then she was sentenced as a terrorist. I think it's always the same story in all our countries. She was sentenced as a terrorist, and now she's been released because of international pressure. And she's on a travel ban. She's on a travel ban, but my whole family is on a travel ban, basically. Why? I think that everyone thinks, or a lot of people think that Saudi Arabia is reforming, that it's going through deep changes, etc. But the truth is, everything is a facade. What is happening in the country is that there is no civil society anymore. Everyone is being muzzled. The changes that we see are merely, social changes that could, that are not stable, basically. So, for instance, there are some examples I could give. The fact that the religious police has been removed, they've basically countered it or, nuanced it with the fact that they gave to the normal police new prerogatives that are the morality, public decency laws. So basically, a normal policeman could arrest a woman based on his own thoughts of what is public decency. It's always, people think that Saudi is changing, but the male guardianship system is still in place. Women, for example, I think that everyone heard that women can now travel without the consent of the male guardian, which was applauded everywhere, but no one knows about the disobedience law, which basically, if you do anything that your male guardian, which is your father, your husband, sometimes your son, considers as disobedience, you can get arrested in this care home. So every new freedom that is granted to women is countered by this disobedience law because they truly don't want this male guardianship to be dismantled. Another thing, I said there's the roll up there, you can see it. There are four examples of women in Saudi Arabia. Salma al-Shihab, for example, she was sentenced a couple of months ago to 34 years in prison for retweeting me, which says a lot about what is happening in the country. And she retweeted a tweet in which I was asking for the release of my sister. So the country is really, not going the right way. Women's rights are basically the same as before, as long as you have the disobedience law and you have these care homes, it won't change. And yes, I don't know, if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask, but I'll end up by saying that one way to help is the country is going through economic changes, which is true, and this can help actually, because the regime is cares a lot about its image, and they try to cover up what is truly going on. So you, as free people who can go inside the country, I cannot, and without being arrested, speak. I think that it's important to question everything when you are inside the country or when your governments are collaborating with Saudi Arabia, asking about why my sister is still on a travel ban, asking why Salma al-Shihab has been sentenced to 34 years in prison. These examples, they try so hard to cover them up. I'm one amongst maybe 10 or 20 Saudis that can speak. So please support us when we give information, try to relay them. And I am 100% positive that any word and any question can help bring change.
Adesso dovremmo avere un contributo di padre Albert, che è un...
We should have a contribution by Father Albert, an activist and a priest in the Philippines supporting human rights. And good morning. Welcome, Father. Good morning to everyone. My name is Father Albert Leon from the Philippines, and I am coming from the Gregorian University. Vi ascolto quello che avete da dire. Prego.
Thank you to all, especially the organizers, for inviting me to represent the voice of those who are fighting for the immediate release of our dear Philippine Senator Laila de Lima. She has been unjustly imprisoned for 6 years now, since 2017. I say confidently and passionately, unjustly, because I know the circumstances surrounding the false accusations against this noble woman. So I'm a Jesuit priest who has been engaged in fighting corruption, human rights violations, and working for peace in the Philippines. Now, I mentioned that because when I started teaching in Davao City in southern Philippines, I saw Laila de Lima as chair of the Commission on Human Rights. And I witnessed how she courageously investigated the human rights violations of the then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte. She also helped in investigating the brutal murder of my missionary friend in the hands of a local terrorist group. But more importantly, we were partners in exposing the bloody war on drugs by the same Duterte who used to be mayor and then president. The police admitted to having killed 7,000 in the name of the war on drugs, but the NGOs, we estimate more than that, about 30,000. And sadly, it's not in the news here. No? Now, during her incarceration, I usually said masses inside her jail, together with a few other priests. And I testify that Senator Laila de Lima is a woman of strength. Is a woman of faith. I'm a priest, but my faith pales in comparison with her. We would visit her not to console her, but to gain inspiration from her. She was a woman of fortitude, of gravitas, of intellectual acumen, of moral stamina, and of passionate love for her people. But recently, even inside the jail, she was hostage by some of the other prisoners who were leaders of terrorist groups in southern Philippines, and she got hurt. Fortunately, she survived, but the three others who hostaged her were killed inside the jail. Now, it's sad that the killings continue. Just recently, 3 months ago, a hard-hitting journalist was here and we had dinner, but a few weeks ago he was assassinated just near his house. Fortunately, his brother continues now the broadcast. But the killings continue, and my good friend, Father Flavi Villanueva, takes care of the victims of this violence. It pains me to be to be here in Rome. I should be there. Now, fortunately, we have other women of strength and virtue, like Nobel laureate Maria Ressa, Senator Risa Hontiveros, Justice Conchita Carpio Morales, former Supreme Court Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno, and former Vice President Leni Robredo. Please invite them. Please invite them. Put them in the news. So now I don't have much time, but so let me thank you for amplifying the voice of all these women of strength throughout the world. I would like to address you, women of strength. The world is in pain, but we seriously need you. So many men are like us, stupid and violent. So finally, let me just read a portion of the statement of Isambayan, which I co-founded. It's a political group for integrity and good governance. Isambayan called for the immediate release of former Senator Laila de Lima. The prosecution's lack of evidence to prove Senator de Lima's guilt warrants her immediate release. The prosecution witnesses already admitted in court that they have no personal knowledge of the senator's involvement in the alleged charges. It is also clear that the implied conspiracy was based only on speculations and unwarranted conjectures. 6 judges inhibited themselves. They refused to make a judgment. In addition, the former handling judge betrayed his manifest partiality by blatantly omitting critical and exculpatory facts elicited directly from the prosecution witnesses. The prosecution witnesses, recanting their previous testimonies, could establish nothing but the lack of basis for continuing to keep the senator behind bars of injustice. This political charade is nothing but a personal vendetta from her earlier probe of death squads in Davao City to being an ardent critic of the horrible drug war. There being no factual and legal basis for holding her any longer, we demand the immediate release of Senator Laila de Lima. Thank you very much, and I salute all the women of strength, and thank you for the organizers again.
Grazie, Padre Albert.
Many thanks, Father Albert. And I would now like to pass the floor to Katie Koita.
Katie Koita è senegalese, ha vissuto in
President Olapalable in Senegal. She has lived in France and then in Belgium. She has long been an activist against violence on women, and in particular against female genital mutilation. She wrote the book Mutilated, and she is a co-founder of the Group for the Abolition of Sexual Mutilations in Belgium. I will speak French, it's better for me. Good morning, everyone. It is an honor for me to be here in Rome once again. I thank the organizers and all those involved in the organization of this event. Surely today in 2022 we would think that all this belonged to the past, but unfortunately in the world violence against women is getting worse and worse. These 2 weeks of violence against women, this day of the 10th of December, the day of International Day of Human Rights, it should allow the whole world, with no exceptions, to fully enjoy these fundamental rights. And it should grant the right to life, to equal opportunities, and, among other things, the right to healthcare, to education. But unfortunately, these rights are interpreted where we live by a few people who govern the country. Today, the most blatant violation of human rights is violence against women and girls. This kind of violence is borderless. They don't belong to a specific social class. There is no geographical boundary to it. They're all the same wherever you may go. They are to be found all over the world. According to some UN agencies, 1 woman in 3 will, sooner or later, suffer physical or sexual abuse in her life. This is extremely sad. These women in the world, it depends where they live in the world, but when we hear them describe their experience, what happened to them, to their sisters in their country, well, we might say that in Africa, too, we are free. We are free to think, free to say certain things. But often that's just a facade. That's not the real how things really are, because reality is much more complex than it seems. Today, these women have been stripped of their rights, of their life, of their dreams, because there are certain cultures, certain traditions, because this affects ordinary life. They become sexual objects. They become objects that create new human beings. They are linked to procreation, nothing more. And we often include them in a picture that has been painted by men, just by men. All too often, women are manipulated, they are brainwashed. And this is done to those who want to try to rebel, those who want to try to get hold of their freedom. But we must preserve other values. Very often, we will get people who challenge certain rules that are imposed on us. And these people will endanger their lives in order for other people to live their dreams in the future, the dream of living. This dream, these dreams that the policies that are converted into laws and that become conventions accepted worldwide, well, we hope that one day these policies will allow for the disclosure of certain documents and for the enforcement of certain treaties, because unfortunately many of these documents are still locked up in drawers and the rules are never enforced. We need to enforce them to ensure justice, to make sure that these women, these girls, these children who have unjustly been mutilated, raped, abused, finally find justice. As if they were private war weapons, stripped of their freedom just for expressing their thought, which is the thought of the majority of the population. People who stay silent because they fear retaliation. The pressure put by these women is to be seen in all spheres, in religion, in culture. And they are always being kept under pressure. But if things are slightly improved in our country, it is credit must go to them, to these women. The strength of these women will be the solidarity, will be networking. But we cannot expect anything if there is no education. It is paramount to provide education to girls, to children, in order for them to find their own path and make sure that they have to get married when they're 7 with a man who might be their grandfather. And they are all forced to keep silent. We are sometimes free to talk, but we feel pressure from society, from families sometimes. Then again, women are still the pillars, the cornerstone of politicians, who sometimes make promises, but women themselves never enjoy progress. They keep on dying because they have no access to health care. They walk for kilometers to get to a hospital and have access to healthcare services. But hospitals don't work properly. roads are not proper roads. So how can we ever enjoy progress? But we hear a lot of talk about progress. We shouldn't talk about progress. We know that we are pretty far away from enjoying progress. Our former president in the year 2000 said that Dakar would become like Paris. It is sad today when we visit that place in my country to see what the situation is like. And in Europe too, women have gone backwards in terms of rights. At the beginning, when I started my activism, when Madame Simone Veil opened the doors to us in Paris, telling us we could attend schools in order to raise awareness in the world about female genital mutilation, at the time we were insulted. Our own compatriots would despise us, but today these compatriots admire us. But violence within the family, violence against girls, girl children, continue. Some people continue with these so-called traditions, getting them married rather than sending them to school, having them mutilated. Concluding, today, many years on, I think that starting from 2019, 2020, when I started working with Non c'è pace senza giustizia, no peace without justice, and conferences, the European Parliament, I thank Ms. Emma Bonino for being there, and in the United Nations too, the resolutions that prohibited female genital mutilation. Well, since then, a lot of things have happened. Many countries have truly worked. Many associations have put pressure on politicians to change things. And some things have changed. But today we get the impression that we must take a step back and go back to the places where nothing has been done, even if we have done quite a lot elsewhere. But unfortunately, sometimes politics gets in the way. In 2006, we founded an association, La Palabre, and in 2017, we received funds from Madrid through the cooperation of Madrid. And these funds allowed us, I was naive at the time, I thought that all these girls who had left school to get married would divorce and then went to big cities and would become prostitutes. I thought they had nowhere else to go. So we set up some shelter centers which provided aid to them, which would allow them to learn something and become independent. We hoped at the time that these centers in Senegal could actually be set up, and indeed they will be inaugurated soon with the help of the Japanese embassy. We always expect an official commitment from our government, from our local agencies, in order to have the proper staff. These centers should exist everywhere because women and girls absolutely need them, and very often we must work together with men. We must work on men. If we don't change the mindset of men, these problems will never come to an end. Violence mentally destroys the human being. It gets the person depressed forever, for a lifetime. These social pressures resort to religion to manipulate us. This means killing women. There are places where during a war, it is always the woman that pays the highest cost. But women should no longer be inferior beings. They should be on a par with men. So thank you for listening to me. I could go on forever, but thank you. Thank you very much. I now leave the floor to Rosanna Oliva, Rete per la Parità, jurist. Through an appeal, she obtained one of the paramount rulings in terms of equality between men and women, eliminating discrimination for access to public offices, changing Italian regulation. In 2010, Rosanna Oliva founded Rete per la Parità, Network for Equality, which promotes initiatives to make equality in Italy effective and to bridge the gaps between generations.
Buongiorno a tutti e a tutti, davvero per me è bello essere qui oggi ad ascoltare queste.
It is so beautiful to be here today and listen the testimonies of so many women coming from all countries worldwide with their own terrible stories, but with their strength, armed of a great strength. This is a title of today, The Strength of Women, which was really hitting me. Women are strong, are brave. There is lots of women that are brave. And this was also the evidence of Italian women, sisters of Iranian girls and women, how much brave they are and what great courage they are displaying. And then the concept of change. This is a panel allowing for the making of change, making change happen, a change for the better, obviously, because unfortunately change sometimes occurs for the worst. And we do have so many examples of all this, unfortunately. And with respect to the dramatic events that distressed us in the month of August of 2021, let me go back to what Linda Laura Sabatini wrote on August the 17th, that is immediately after the fall of Kabul. And she wrote it on a newspaper known La Stampa. Pain, hopelessness, the willingness to do something for men and women in Afghan. But what? How? Everything was so moving so fast. Everything happened in such a fast situation. So this is why we have to go back with our minds to the past, where there are women prisoners at home and outside home, made invisible under the burqa, Talibans that were flogging and amputating women's and maiming women's, thinking that they were the own property of the male of the family, men deprived of their own elementary freedoms, women in Afghan who under the burqa were breathing their own breath, as Amma Bonino was saying. Brave as always, Emma went to Kabul. She flight to Kabul when she was a European Commissioner, and she was arrested there for just a few hours by the so-called religious police for the prevention of vice and the promotion of virtue. That was happening in the month of September 1997. The clock of history has been going backwards, and it's gone backwards for more than 20 years. I'm still in a state of distress. I was hit hard by the words I just read. And these words express exactly what we felt on that very day, that willingness to do something. But what? How could we activate ourselves? I am more than proud to say that ever since that day, a lot was done for Afghan women, and especially thanks to the network of the Rete for Parity, the Network for Parity and Equal Rights. And a few months after this event, we signed a protocol with the Homeland Ministry to support Afghan women and their families that were refugee families in Italy. Now, this is an initiative that was promoted by Sandra Sarti. She's here with us today. And she is the one who induced us to get started. And we fought in this incredible adventure, an adventure that has not come to the end, not yet, still ongoing, which requires commitment, full of moments of joy because of the results that we were reaping, and full of fear because it seemed that everything was destined to abruptly come to an end. But instead, this Afghanistan project that was joined by a number of associations, amongst which Les Contemporaires, is progressing, is still making progress. It's obtaining concrete results that are very important. And in the afternoon, you will probably hear from the very voice of some Afghan girls, young women, who were supported thanks to this project. What is the stage today? Where do we stand today? And we could support Francesca Mozzone, a journalist, a sports journalist dealing with biking, and she was supporting a group of Afghan young cyclists of the Azar ethnic, so an ethnicity which was hard hit by the Taliban's, and they found refuge in Pakistan. They were there still waiting to travel to Italy. That was a long moment for them. They were waiting, and thanks to us and thanks to the help of Marina Sereni, the deputy minister with the foreign ministry, and of the Episcopal Conference, we could allow these girls to benefit of the humanitarian corridor, and they finally reached Italy at the end of July the last. They were hosted in the municipality of L'Aquila in some of the free dwellings, and the Episcopal community led forward this Afghanistan project together with the many other associations that are collaborating to allow for the progress of this initiative. Now we've reached a good point, we've reached a good stage, and for each one of these young women, not only cyclist women, but also their fathers and families, we know what are their individual needs thanks to their voices, because we now have for each one of them, for each of their own families, and even for children aged only a couple of years, 2, 3 years of age. For each one of them, we know their traits, their needs, their projects of life, and we hope that we will be accompanying them along that pathway until when they will take off by themselves. The final goal, obviously, is the independence, the full autonomy, and by availing ourselves of helping each one of them, understanding what they need. Well, thanks to that, some of the girls were recently moved to Rome, to Rome, and we shall hear their voices in the afternoon. Others went to Florence, and they could join their families thanks to the humanitarian corridors. So we are now witnessing the very first concrete results of this wonderful adventure that we took part in. And it's not just us, because together with us there are so many other people, so many other persons and other supporting associations. We were never alone. And let me just quote a Sol Optimist, which is helping us. And since many of these girls had eating problems, they supported them with a diet expert, a dietitian, supporting them, giving them a new opportunity to feed themselves in the appropriate way, because in Pakistan for a long time they were living incredible conditions, and obviously they were shocked by that experience. They were sort of out of control as far as their own diet is concerned. So little by little they're being helped and regain their own strengths. And even from the schooling point of view, these girls will be going to classes at the University La Sapienza in Rome. Many of them, unfortunately, had to give up their studies. And I won't mention the many problems to try and provide them with schooling certificates, degrees, which were lost in their own countries, thanks to the incredible help of the Episcopal community. And let me just say something, one last thing about the Afghanistan project. What really struck me in the very early moments, in the very early months, was that together, in trying to support these young women, there weren't just us, but there were also Israeli people, the first to fund their stay in Pakistan were Muslims, Israeli associations, Christians, lay people. To me, that was an incredible thing. I am a lay person. I do have respect of all religions. I don't have a religion of my own, but I do respect others, other religions. So I think that seeing all that was really beautiful. And to see coming together so many different cultures, people, persons, religions, and all of them doing that in order to help this incredible group that was so much in need of help. And this is not over yet. This is an adventure which is still ongoing, as we all know. And with this respect, let me also say one more thing. I do agree, 100% agree with what Emma Bonino has been doing for years, for so many years. I've been with her joining this Pari o Dispari association. There were many of us who were young at that time, and we started off from the idea of trying to have a guarantee for the rights, recognizing the rights of women. Unfortunately, this is something which has not become a reality. We have a two-chamber committee fighting against discriminations of rights and of women. We are still, after 10 years, trying to find a solution to this issue. This is something that allows me to say that the only solution that would still accept and embrace what needs to be done in order to grant an equal footing, which is not only formal but also substantial, which was designed by our own constitution, because parity, inequality, and equal footing means that we have to rest upon what has been written and what yet has to be written, what yet has to be done in abiding by the Italian Constitution and trying to stay in line with the Italian Constitution. So many thanks to you, Simona. And now I would like to call Sharban Waidari. Sharban Waidari is the Deputy President, and she's graduated in computer sciences, and she specialized in India. Today she's attending the master with the American University in Rome. After being evacuated from Kabul, many of the activist women who had a success career in Afghanistan were once again deprived of their own freedom and self-determination. The luckiest one found shelter in a foreign country. 7 women are in Rome, found shelter in Rome, and they founded an association of solidarity for women, working for women to support women from Afghan who reached Italy and the ones that stayed in Afghan who are now under the new Taliban regime.
شربانو حیدری هستم، معاون انجمن اسوسیاسیون دی سولیداریتا دونه پر le donne و تشکر میکنم از تمام هماهنگ کننده ها و برگزار کننده های این برنامه، به خصوص اما بونانیو، سناتور اما بونینو، و خوشحال هستم که این فرصت بر من دادند تا بیام اینجا صحبت کنم درباره انجمن و همچنین وضعیت زنان افغانستان.
Good morning. My name is Sharam Haidari. I'm Deputy President of the Association for the Solidarity of Women. And I would like to thank all of the organizers for giving me this opportunity of being here today. I am so happy and glad for being here, and many thanks to Senator Emma Bonino. And today I'd like to say something about our own association, but also something about the situation experienced by Afghan women.
امسال 7 زن پناهنده افغانستانی در ایتالیا انجمنی را به نام STD ایجاد کردند که هدف این انجمن حمایت و توانمندسازی زنان افغانستان پناهجو و یا همچنان مهاجر داخل ایتالیا هست و همچنان دادخواهی برای زنان حقوق زنان در افغانستان و در ایتالیا.
Nel maggio di quest'anno,
In the month of May this year, 7 Afghan women decided to set up an association known as ASDD, the Solidarity Association for Women, Fighting for Women, with the goal of creating new opportunities, support opportunities for Afghan women that migrated and that are refugees, asking for justice because of what they suffer, because of the fact that their rights are denied and they are deprived of their own rights in Afghanistan.
از کمپ‌های مهاجرین، از کمپ‌های پناهنده ها در بدترین وضعیت که ما در وضعیتی که زندگی می‌کردیم به عنوان پناهجو، این ایده به ما الهام بخشید که مبارزات خود، فعالیت‌های خود که در افغانستان داشتیم ادامه بدیم در ایتالیا.
Dovete sapere che
You probably should know that the idea of setting up this association came to us in the very moment when we just arrived here, and we were in a camp for asylum seekers, and we then remembered the many battles we fought in Afghanistan, and we thought that the time had come to go on fighting and create this new container of different associations.
سال تحصیل و کار زنان افغانستان در افغانستان بود. یعنی 20 سال محیط برای زنان افغانستان قسمی ترتیب شده بود که زنان میتونستند درس بخوانند، کار کنند و رأی بدهند و همچنان انتخاب بشن به عنوان یک سیاستمدار و یا به عنوان یک کسی که در آینده خود سهم میگیرد.
In the course of the past 20 years, Afghan women had the possibility of studying and working in Afghanistan, thus allowing for the existence of situations where they could be the actors and the protagonists within the Afghan society. They could vote and they could be voted in the political arena, thus becoming useful for the future of the country.
ربط داره به پنل موضوع ما که میکینگ چنج یا به ایتالیایی تغییر ایجاد میکنیم. یعنی ما 20 سال تغییر ایجاد کردیم. داخل ایتالیا انجمنی را ساختیم برای بهبود زندگی خود و داخل افغانستان که من میخوایم صحبت کنم سرش، زنان شروع کردن از همون روزهای اول شروع کردن از خیابان به جنگ با طالبان، با دستهای خالی آمدن شروع کردن به اعتراض.
Now, all this has a lot to do with the theme of this panel, making change happen, and with the goal of this association. Immediately after the Taliban taking power last summer, women started demonstrating and marching in the Afghanistan streets. They started marching peacefully with bare hands, and they started protesting.
بالاترین سطح رسیده. محروم شدن از تعلیم تربیه و حتی محدود شدن از دسترسی به خدمات صحی در افغانستان یک فاجعه است.
Violence against women in Afghanistan nowadays has reached unprecedented levels. The limits that were set, or limitations set to their own right to education and their access to health services are now unprecedented, have now reached limitations that are unprecedented.
در افغانستان بر دست گرفتن در صدد حذف زنان از تمام صحنه‌های جامعه است، چه صحنه اجتماعی چه سیاسی، و زنان مجبور کرده که در خانه بشینند.
C'è un apartheid.
There is a gendered apartheid ongoing in Afghanistan. The Taliban are trying to erase women from public life, social life, and political life in Afghanistan.
زنان زندانی در زندانهای طالب بالا رفتن. هر روز ما کیس های جدیدی را داریم که زنان به واسطه طالب دزدیده میشن و در زندان محو میشن. هیچ کسی از آینده آنها، از وضعیت آنها با خبر نیست. مانند عالیه عزیزی 1 سال و 1 ماه گذشت که عالیه عزیزی در زندان طالب است. ظریفه یعقوبی و فرحت پوپلزی و اینها تنها نمونه های از زنان زندانی در افغانستان هستند که هیچ کس از سرنوشت آنها خبر ندارد.
More and more Afghan women that are being kidnapped and arrested, and once they're been kidnapped, they just disappear from the scene. There are so many names that I could provide, one of which is Ali Azizi, who disappeared a year and a month ago, who has disappeared, or many other names that I am now mentioning, other women, in other words, who disappear and just vanish.
باری در افغانستان بالا رفتن.
Women are being raped by the Taliban, and sometimes they are obliged and forced to marry them.
مشکلاتی است که در افغانستان وجود دارد و ما تلاش داریم که به عنوان یک نهاد زنان افغانستان در ایتالیا صدایشان باشیم.
There are so many problems that women are facing in Afghanistan, and with this organization of women fighting for women, we try and be their own voice, the echo of their voice, and do something for them.
داخل ایتالیا می‌خوایم صحبت کنم موضوع خیلی از پناهنده هایی که این دفعه آمدن، این بار آمدن به ایتالیا متفاوت هستند. اکثریتشان تحصیل کرده هستند، اکثریتشان کار کردن، تجربه کاری در نهادهای ملی و بین المللی دارند و نکته مثبتی که اینها دارند، اینا خیلی زودتر میتونند در جامعه ایتالیا ادغام شوند. اما اگر ما پلان ادغام سازی این زنان مطابق با توانایی هایشان داشته باشیم.
I would now like to talk about asylum seeker women reaching Italy recently. These women are different. These women are educated, they have university degrees. They often worked within national or international organizations. They have the competence and the ability to integrate themselves in the Italian society, but it is also right for them to perform a task which is up to their own standards.
مدت کوتاه که در ایتالیا هستیم برگزاری 2 ورکشاپ برای فامیلی پلنینگ هست، تنظیم خانواده و همچنان دادن مشاوره روانشناسی و همچنان صحت زنان به 60 نفر و همچنان مشاوره در قسمت حقوق پناهجویان و همچنان معرفی 10 زن و 1 مرد به برنامه‌های کارآموزی و والنتیری.
Let me just conclude by saying what we achieved thanks to this association in the recent period. We conducted some workshops on themes such as family protection, contraceptive treatments, counseling, psychological counseling, health of women. And we also allowed for moments of legal counseling for the asylum seekers. We also allowed them to establish contacts, not only women but also men, with organisms and organizations that provide jobs to these women and to these persons. And now we will have a video which was sent by Maya Luku Kumeti. She is the leader of the Brazilian Amazon.
Primeiro quero cumprimentar a todas e poder dizer.
I wanted to greet you all and tell you how honored I am to be here together. I thank you for the opportunity to tell you about the struggle of indigenous women in Brazil, in the Brazilian Amazon. I belong to two indigenous peoples. You are all sisters, mothers of the same earth, so I would like to tell you about the struggle of indigenous peoples in Brazil, in Amazon, in the Brazilian Amazon. The Kayapo have a leader whose family I am privileged to be part of. I am the great-grand-niece of Cacique Crony, who has been at the forefront of the dialogue between Mebem Kokrik and the non-indigenous society. He's been part of a struggle that has reached achievements and results such as the protection of our lands, of the Mecranotre land, also participating in the process of the demarcation of Xingu indigenous lands in the Mato Grosso area. Since I was a child, I have been immersed in the work, in the struggle, in the love that my father and grandfather have always had. So, this way of defending our rights, our territories, this is the part of my family. The part of my family, of the Mebem Groke Kayapom people. My late grandfather was a cacique of the Wara people, and as a child I had the opportunity to live with them in the territory, in the village. That's where I learned with them, with my grandfather, who is no longer here. I learned that each element of nature has its own guardian. This must be respected. The body, our body, is like the body of Mother Earth. It must be cared for, defended, and protected. This is the lesson and the mission I have always carried since. I've always pursued. This is the way of life of the indigenous peoples. It's about the connection, the relationship, the balance that exists between man and nature. We realize that we are not different. We are not separated from nature. We are part of nature itself. So we must take care of nature. We must follow this mission to respect Mother Earth, to respect the earth and all its resources. And while defending it, while defending life, indigenous women play a fundamental role. They always have. The problem is that they were made invisible. But they have always been at the forefront in the struggle for the preservation, the safeguard of our land, of our ancestral heritage, and for handing down through generations this way of life, passing the knowledge of indigenous women to future generations. While men, political leaders, the warriors, they were at the forefront of the struggle for preserving and delimiting our territory, our rights, preserving our rights to live according to our traditions. Indigenous women have always been responsible for the defense, for the passing on, for the transmission, for passing down this knowledge from one generation to another. And we, who are the future generations of that generation, carry all this. We have the duty to carry it. We work alongside our warriors, our political leaders. We fight with them. We hold an important role in decision-making processes, because it is women, because this is women who know the needs of the territory, the requirements of the territory. These women stay with their children, they take care of their health, their nutrition, they take care of the environment. So these indigenous women have been active, have been playing a role in obtaining a proper place in the decision-making process. And they have done so with great wisdom and showing great resilience, with great resolve. For example, part of the process of playing this role, we're actually seeing it. The fact that we have a female point of reference. Tuira Kayapo, leader of the Kayapo people. She was the first to give visibility to the Kayapo women's struggle against a large hydroelectric dam project in 1989. She opened doors, she opened eyes, she shed light on and raised awareness as to, in order to make indigenous women visible, and she proved that her struggle is a struggle for life. Many years later, many other women are pursuing this struggle, but they are protagonists of survival. They pursue the fight to protect our rights and say no to all this violence, to all these violations of rights that indigenous peoples have long been suffering. In 2018, when we talk about the taking back our space, playing our role in politics, because it is in the Congress that we are usually threatened by various bills and laws that aim to take and invade our territories, plunder forests, to destroy the Amazon rainforest, always talking about development, progress, leveraging on the economic element. That is why indigenous women have playing this role, have taken their place in the decision-making process in politics. And the result of this process has allowed these women, us as women, to stand up. We've seen this even with Joenia Wapichana, Brazil's first indigenous member of parliament. And now in 2022 we have Sonia Guajajara, Zagrabia, and more. So this is the empowerment process, this union of women fighting for life, for the rights of indigenous people. All this has boosted our visibility. It is paving the way. It has allowed us to take position, to play our role. My work within the women's movement, especially grassroots local movements, aims to train young female leaders. I work to help train new political leaders and to safeguard, to protect our way of life within the territory. This has been my work, my activity so far. And this is the message I want to get through to you. We, indigenous peoples of the world, must stand up. We must help each other in defending our Mother Earth, that is. That's the message I want to convey. And I will always be available and willing to work to create a network of contacts of indigenous women across the world from all countries in order to pursue this activity of defense, protecting, defecting, ensuring the rights of Mother Earth. We guarantee the existence of indigenous peoples in Brazil, but even elsewhere in other countries of this great Mother Earth, of our Mother Earth. This is our fight, and this is the appeal I am making. I'm calling to all of you on the other side of the screen. I know you're listening to me. I want to tell you that we need, as soon as possible, to unite, to join forces. We need this strength in order to ensure this empowerment. We, the indigenous peoples here in Brazil, especially women, have organized important meetings, gatherings, and strategies. We have devised strategies to organize ourselves in the best possible way in order to defend our Mother Earth. Once again, thank you for allowing me to speak, and I hug each and every one of you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like to thank all the organizers of this event, and I'd like to wrap up with Nadia Volkova, who will be online with us. She is a human rights activist in Kiev, in Ukraine. She is a lawyer specialized in international humanitarian law and criminal law. In 2022, she was awarded the Prize for Human Rights of the Bar and of the European legal societies, following her commitment for human rights and rule of law in Ukraine and at an international level. So we can connect with her. Thank you.
Hello, I hope you can all hear me. Yes? Okay, so I can start. Okay. Dear friends, dear colleagues, thank you so much for having me with you today among such prominent speakers. I'm joining you from the Assembly of State Parties of the International Criminal Court. This is the reason why I couldn't be there with you in person. So the title of the panel, Making a Change, it's always not so easy to talk about the change when you're literally in the middle of it, and it's not just any change. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn when I'm saying that whatever is happening in Ukraine now is affecting the entire world. At least it resonates with many, and some of the consequences can be felt in many corners of this world. So this change is tragic, this change is painful, and many would say that it is above all unfair. And on many levels, it really, really is. And probably I'm going to sound a bit dry, but in a way, I think if we take a step back and dissociate ourselves from the form that this change is being manifested in, ultimately, when all this is over, it actually might end up being a good thing. Often change is about development, and standstill is not natural for humans. We don't know for sure whether it's going to be good or not, but one must hope that all the suffering and pain is not for nothing. And as my 6-year-old son recently said, Mom, you know, only those things that are difficult are also worthy. I think what needs to be mastered is the change and development does not necessarily have to take the form of wars or famine or any form of suffering that brings death and destruction. And we have a long way to go. So I now want to say a few things about myself. Although I'm originally from Ukraine. I left for the UK when I was 17 years old to study and work. I was called to the bar of England and Wales. I worked in the UK, France, the US, and the plan had always been for me to go back to England, get pupillage, become a practicing criminal, human rights barrister, which essentially had been my dream since I was 7 years old. But alas, when I made a pit stop in Kiev, one sunny day, or maybe it was gloomy, I can't remember for sure now, but it was in 2014, and that was the period of time when the war started, as we consider it, the start of the war, the date when the Crimea was annexed by the Russian Federation, and also it was followed by the breakout of armed hostilities in eastern Ukraine. And so that made me stop and think, what was it that I really wanted to do with my life? Did I really want to chase pupillage somewhere in England when my own country was suffering? And so at that point, I had an epiphany that whatever dreams I had and expectations from life I had, they were shattered, but also they had to be put on hold in any case. So I decided to stay and be useful. That was my first substantial change. And this is how I did become human rights lawyer, and only not in England, but in Ukraine. And I got on the path of fighting for justice and accountability. And my dream became something else. I wanted to see justice system of Ukraine strong and powerful and capable, and so that the people who suffer wrongs, they can go to domestic institutions and they can rely on them in that they can get redress, they can get remedy, their rights can be restored. But in order to do that, I realized that we needed to do a lot to build the capacity of Ukrainian institutions, because what the war back in 2014 revealed was that Ukrainian justice system was not ready for any of it. So when I started representing victims of armed conflict at the European Court of Human Rights, I realized that although the substance of the violations that were raised were about consequences of the actions of the Russians and maybe separatists, but the procedural bit concerned not only Russia, but also Ukraine. Because Ukraine had a positive obligation to investigate and provide remedies to its own citizens, to its own nationals who suffered the wrongs caused by someone else. So the part in which we began to see the domestic justice system was not fit to provide for any protection. And normally, the role of the civil society would be to criticize and to nag the government to do better. But we also saw that the authorities, even if they wanted to help or to do something constructive, they couldn't, just because they didn't have the skills, they didn't have the knowledge, and they didn't have really the support system within the sort of the government system that they could fall back on. So we decided that the better and more strategic approach was to help them, to support them and guide them in any way that we ourselves could. They were very grateful, and this is how we got closer to building a new system that was more sensitive and accommodating and understanding. Don't get me wrong, it's still far from perfect, and the change was not just slow. It was like one step forward, 2 steps back. But still, we managed to set up a specialized department within the Office of the Prosecutor General that focused solely on crimes committed during the armed conflict. And now we continue our fight because the solution is no longer sustainable, as it happens, for the ongoing situation. But again, some might say that it's not the time for new ideas or for new changes, and that we need to prioritize. First, we need to win the war, and then do everything else. But I don't think I believe that. I believe that amidst chaos and destruction, there are also opportunities to build and create something new, something fresh, that brings life and hope instead of the destruction and death. And ultimately, I think this not only concerns my area, professional area, but I think this can be extrapolated on each and every one of us who's doing journalism, who's doing baking, who's doing, I don't know what, mechanics, electricians. And the last point I would like to make on that is that I think we also have to be supportive of each other, and that's why I think solidarity is crucial in sustaining the change. And Ukraine has been extremely fortunate that the world essentially sided with it, and it has been supporting it, especially when the support, it has been genuine and sincere, and did not have sort of an alternate agenda. But what I have also noticed is that sometimes, in order for the support to be real and meaningful, it also needs to answer the needs. What we have been noticing here is that very often such a support can be quite rigid or superficial, in that it does not answer the real needs, but rather it is about using the existing blueprint solutions that have been developed in, say, other conflict situations, and they have not been adapted. And this often can actually lead to more harm than good. And I think this also needs to change, and this is something that we need to work hard at, because ultimately, what this war has also been teaching us, that we need to become more attuned to the world and its requests, and be diligent when looking for and developing different solutions. So the world is changing, and we need to change with it and make sure that we're in tune and in harmony and in a position to provide the actions and solutions that would actually save us from self-destruction. I guess this is all that I wanted to say today. Thank you so much for your attention and for inviting me.
Thank you, Nadia Volkova. Thanks for other initiative. Allora, adesso abbiamo tempo per una brevissima...
We have time for a coffee break, and then we'll have a panel with our politicians. See, some of them have reached us. Susanna Camusso, Marta Dassù, and others are on their way, including the director of Radio Radicale, which is streaming this session live. See you soon.
Ci siamo? Chiedo agli oratori di avvicinarsi al...
I would like to have the speakers come to the podium so as to resume after the coffee break.
12:30. Ah, funziona. Diciamo che cominciamo tra 5 minuti d'orologio, così.
Okay, let's say that we shall resume in 5 minutes, just to get a little bit ahead of our agenda and thus allowing for other participants to go back to their own duties in the Parliament. So those are the names of the participants to this panel, and as soon as you are ready, please just let me know.
Elena Bonetti che... Non vedo Elena Bonetti. Mancano, Stefania sta in giro qua, Benedetto c'è e non ho visto invece, no, non ho visto la Bonetti. Allora, direi che possiamo cominciare.
I'd say the time has come to get started. Susanna Camusso, I would like you to have here and come to the podium together with Benedetto Dalla Vedova, Alessandro Zan. There is no political criterion for the accommodation and for your seats. Just take to your seats. We are only missing Stefania Craxi. We're just waiting for her to join us. Okay, let's get started. Stefania Craxi is about to join us. And let me first and foremost thank the organizers of this very beautiful and very interesting initiative. Thanks to No Peace Without Justice, Les Contemporaires and Plus Europe for allowing me to be the moderator of this panel. Alessio Falcone is the director of Radio Radicale, and we are moderating the commitment or the engagement of the European Parliament in the framework of this event, the strength of women. I'm sorry, I said European Parliament, but I should have said Italian Parliament. I apologize. So the strength of women, whom we more and more see in the political arena, in the political field. We see how involved and engaged they are. We've already said this in other panels. This is a more national panel, but obviously what's going on in Iran was the object of Emma Bonino's article on the Riformista. And I think that this is truly an extraordinary event. Allow me to make mention of it once again and to invite all of us, starting from myself, not to leave the protagonist of this revolution alone. Saturday in Piazza delle Zedra, there is going to be a demonstration, a peaceful demonstration, a rally of the radicals, and we are all in support of that. Now, let's just say, because of the specific needs, I will start with Alessandro Zan. He was a protagonist, so much before being a person, he's a name. He is representing a fight which was not just supported and joined by those who sustained the need for an advancement of some progress in the front of LGBT policies and more, but definitely, and we were just mentioning it, because of a missed opportunity which may still be missing once again in this mandate, in this term, because history is rich in surprises. I don't know whether you've seen the docu-film on Pannella, and probably if you did, you've seen at that time in that documentary film, a parliament which was much more, between quotation marks, Catholic, or if not Catholic, clerical. There was at that time the Christian Democrat Party, which was one of the greatest parties ever existing, approving the divorce law in 1970. The celebration of that anniversary was just taking place a few days ago. Are we still saying same things, Antonio Zan, or not? Well, once again, thank you. I'm happy to be here together with many other friends. Well, yes, the event of DL Zan was an emblematic event because we did pass in the lower chamber the law. Probably you still recall that event. And we did that because we resorted to a number of mediation activities in order to achieve an agreement and reach an agreement. The only thing we were not willing to give up was downstream sort of mediation which eliminate or deprive the human being of his own, her own dignity. For example, the gender definition is something that exists in many spheres of the state, in the penal crime, in the prison code, that's also very much mentioned. Now, eliminating identity of gender identity is something that would exclude protection from hatred crimes. and let's not forget those who are the most discriminated or the forgotten ones in Italy. And in Italy, we are top of the list because of the many homicides perpetrated against LGBT representatives. And at that time, we could not accept or bring ourselves to sort of change a law by turning it into a law that was not just fighting hatred crimes, but rather into something which was dangerous from that point of view. I am very happy to be here today, also because the parliamentary involvement and activity, which is sort of a bipartisan involvement, allowing for greater empowerment of women, is something that we should all embrace, men and women. Italy is very much behind when compared to our European partners. There is this terrible list whereby Italy ranks 77 in gender gap. We are 67 in this list. We still have a 900 approach, a backward approach, and during the 3 years of the pandemic, we've been increasing terribly the gender gap, especially in the labor field. And if it was already dramatic before that, and especially when considering women who were getting a salary which was 20% less than what their male partners would get. That was something which was giving the precedence to males. We had 192,000 males getting the job, under the 150,000 females getting the same job in 2021. So I believe that the Parliament will have to be surveilling and will have to stay focused, especially in the implementation of the Resilience National Plan, especially with regard to empowerment of women and in opposing the gender gap. Now here the Parliament really will have to do something and be very much surveillant, because the very first signs given by this government, and just thinking of how the ministries are being appointed and the ministers are being appointed, and the names and titles that they get, it's not just a simple formality, it's a substantial thing. And that's the first point. The second point has got to do with the training and the true formation, the work that is being conducted at school, because the gender language and the gender stereotype themes are of paramount importance. Everything starts from there. Even the gender gap topic has got to do with that. Our Prime Minister rather wants herself to be named with the male title, because she believes probably that there can't be a female leadership coming under the flag of a female title. And she pretends being called deputy or member of parliament, but by resorting to the male title. So this is the reason why it is important to go back to the training, and even with the training or formation of gender stereotypes, because still nowadays in textbooks we see images that are still there, that still exist, where the mother is shown while ironing and the father is the one who's the breadwinner. Well, obviously this seems to be rather harmless as a stereotype, going from the pink collar, the blue collar, playing with dolls or playing with soldiers, and the gender stereotypes that seem to be apparently, seemingly harmless may turn in the course of time into prejudice, hatred, violence. The feminicide only too often is the result of gender stereotypes that have been cherished ever since childhood, and they're fed by a society which is imbibed with so many stereotypes. So working on the stereotype creation is of paramount importance from the cultural point of view, but not only that, even from the legislative point of view. It is important to go past the gender gap and past the discrimination, the gender discrimination. Now, recently we passed a law against the gender violence. I think that that's the first concrete positive step forward, and I believe that the parliamentary work from now on is going to be a tough one. It is going to require great opposition, political opposition, and this is what we are heading for from this point of view. Thank you to Alessandro Zan, and now Elena Bonetti. She is going to deliver a contribution online. She was Minister for Equal Opportunities in the Conti II government, and then during the Draghi mandate. She definitely represents a privileged observation point, a privileged desk, because of the many insights she acquired from the government point of view. What is the state of the art in Italy? What is it that we need to do in Italy? Because quite obviously we tend to look forward, but sometimes we run the risk of forgetting some missed opportunities. Should we regret something which we did miss, such as maybe not allowing for majorities to be formed and not expecting homogeneous majorities that are not aligned with the many other surrounding ones? Now, obviously, we are referring to the majority, and we are slightly disfavored as opposition groups. Now, what would you like to say, or what would you like to tell us? In the first place, good morning, and I hope you can hear me. In the first place, also, let me thank you for this invitation and celebrate this very important initiative. I apologize being online, but I am here in the Parliament because of the ongoing parliamentary works. In the first place, let me go back to the theme you just mentioned, which is very broad. Well, from this point of view, I believe that we should make a very careful analysis of what we experienced, what we lived in past years. Those were years that highlighted some outcomes, the results due to policies and procedures that were layering one on top of the other during those years. And we check the activities of women as opposed to what men did in this country. The first element is the presence of women in the labor world. That's the first element to be considered. And we saw during the pandemic how much women were hard hit, not only by the pandemic, but also in terms of losing jobs. And the extreme overburdening of care duties that they had to face at home. Now, this is not only the evidence of a structural fragility of women, but also a structural fragility of the social, cultural, working position held by women in this country. Now, this is why we intended to intervene, and we wanted to establish a structural strategy in the course of time. The first element, allowing for the development of this strategy, is the setting of goals, goals that were to be shared at European level, which were defining. I hope that you can hear me because I have a strong echo. The online signal or the internet signal is not an excellent one. It is barely understandable, but we hear you. So I will try and go ahead. The first strategy we wanted to bring forward was the one of the structural presence of women in the labor world by defining specific goals in the area of labor, of wages, of skills, of the female power and leadership, and also the sharing of the many household tasks and needs at home, and to have them equally shared between men and women. Now, we did activate goals and political activity actions, a governance that came from an observatory, and also something that was envisaging the surveillance of parliamentarian women, and also a new reading of the PNR, the resilience plan and recovery plan. In the first place, attention was placed on equal positions and equal gender parity. This was also at the level of European framework with some initiatives. Then we also introduced another important principle, supporting women, supporting kindergarten, the approach to parental leave, together with maternity leaves on an equal footing, and investments that would reduce the cost of labor bearing on the women, allowing for women staying and keeping their own jobs. This is an approach that allowed for some clear objectives, especially in the plan for recovery and resilience. But obviously there is a lingering fear of stepping backward, going backwards along this pathway. And in the next budgetary law, there are no resources for maternity or paternity leaves so as to implement all of the actions that were envisaged by the strategy at national level, which needs to be brought forward at country level. Now, obviously, this is not a nice signal. It's not a reassuring signal from the Parliament point of view. So we should be vigilant. We should stay vigilant so as to achieve our own goals.
La deputata
Member of Parliament, Senator Maiorino of Movimento 5 Stelle, Five-Star Movement. She is a member of a party that has been involved in the government, the formation of the governments of the past parliamentary terms. So, could you tell us what has been done, what we failed to achieve over the past parliamentary terms, and if what this term can allow us to envisage? Because the positive thing about politics is being able to lay the foundations to generate results that on paper seem to be very troublesome, very hard to achieve. I think of the Draghi government, and Ms. Camuso will also tell us more about this. She became a member of parliament after being in the trade unions for a long time. So, going back to the Draghi government, we expected results. The Democratic Party expected results which it hadn't even considered with the previous government led by Conte. So that was a government that was somewhat to the left of the previous one. But with the Draghi government, which had Forza Italia and the League, it was more of a central government. And some goals were a bit difficult to achieve. I think of the Ius Soli that was set by the Democratic Party. From this standpoint, do you think this parliamentary term will be played in defense if we look at the law on abortion? Prime Minister Meloni said she will not touch the law. What else can we picture? Alessandro Zan, unfortunately, has to leave us. He has to go back to Parliament. Good morning, everyone. First of all, a question that was asked. Let's answer your very long question. You mentioned the funds and the goals of the National Resilience and Recovery Plan, and goal number 5 is about gender equality. A big difference I've noticed compared with the other goals from the parliamentary works standpoint, and then governing is something else. But when it comes to gender policies, there is no specific committee where we can draft strategies and regulations within the parliament. And on the one hand, this is understandable because gender-related policies are cross-border, they are transversal. But that's what makes them lame, because the fact that anyone in any committee, any member of parliament or senator can draft a law, then they will have to consider the impact on gender equality of that law. And this is something that seldom happens. And that's one of the reasons why we have experienced a slowdown, because a lot of these reasons are often underestimated. The Department for Equal Opportunities is a secondary ministry, has no portfolio. So, aside from all that is being said about gender policies, not much is actually being done. And this is something that we are actually trying to change by changing our culture, our approach. But we did mention approach before, and the Femicide Committee in the last parliamentary term tried to deal with the issue of violence against women comprehensively, also looking at the more intangible causes. So stereotypes, for example, that are handed down from generation to generation, and they're still there. And we also mentioned textbooks. And these stereotypes are totally unnoticed in our textbooks. This is a picture from a geography textbook that was sent to me by the president of the Monitoring Center of Violent Men. This is a text of her school book of a daughter from junior high school. Two factors in particular. Women tend to get married later in life to obtain a good level of education and a job, and to have less children, to be forced not to give up their jobs. This is written in the textbook. How wrong is that sentence? Honestly, everything is wrong in this sentence. They get married late simply because it seems as if we're back in the 19th century. I can have a child only if I got married. That seems to be their approach. Only if I got married in church, otherwise I cannot have children. And then the fact that it seems that the two things clash with each other. They're put in writing. Either you choose this or you choose that. You don't have other options. I don't know whether to interpret this sentence as a bit of something that is there to provoke us, to cause a stir. But it's a school textbook, honestly. So this is one of the reasons why we still have the figures that you previously mentioned. The fact that this government wants to deny the will that has been expressed by Giorgia Meloni to be called the president, masculine, not feminine, is part of a strategy through which they want to deny not a deontological difference between men and women, but a difference we have experienced throughout the centuries. We have seen this. Women have not had the same kind of edge that men have. They've always been lagging behind. And this is to be seen in the attack on certain rights that have been conquered. But even on softer items that hardly make it on the headlines, for example, the dismantling of the so-called woman option, which is restricted to certain category. You have to be a caregiver to have that kind of benefit. although you can opt for pre-retirement. But this approach penalizes women. It is detrimental to women and wants to bring back the hands of time. It wants to take us decades back. I'm thinking of the battle for abortion. And again, they will leave the law 194 on abortion unchanged. That's very likely. There will be some controversy. But it is easy to undermine it, and they've been doing it for decades, simply making it very hard to enforce. What can the Parliament do? I'm wrapping up. I am promoting the creation of an interparliamentary group for the preservation and promotion of the rights of the LGBT community. Perhaps we could do something when it comes to gender policies in safeguarding the rights of women, because the Femicide Committee, which we are about to approve at the Chamber of Deputies, and it will probably start operating in January, has a very specific focus on combating violence. But gender violence is not the whole aspect. Being a party of opposition, but I think that majority parties might be interested in getting involved, we should try to be united on certain topics. And there are several approaches we can agree on, therefore forming a united coalition. And that's what we're trying to do to preserve the rights of the LGBT community. Thank you.
Now, the story of leading us back to the president. Now, Emma Bonino is not really interested in that, but I think that there is a risk there. The risk is that that's not the best communication tool for the advancement of all of our instances and requests. So much so that the person sitting to my left, Susanna Camusso, was the very first woman to lead the first Italian trade union. And when I had the honor of hosting her at the radio, I called her secretary, Madam Secretary. And she didn't say, call me segretaria in Italian, which is Madam Secretary. Now, it's not just like saying Camusso like Meloni, who is the first woman requesting the male title. Probably it's only a matter of convenience. Now, the secretariat of Mrs. Camusso is very important, as we all know, but that's not just it. Because Senator, I've seen you sort of perplexed with respect to the reassurances given by Mrs. Meloni regarding the 194 law. Senator Maiorino also said another important thing with that respect, that we should try and avoid sabotage, which was what happened for the past 10 years. Now, she's been appointed just 1 month ago. She never had any monopoly. And the regions, and I should not be the one saying that, but also center-left regions are not, apart with some exceptions, are not the ones that represent the most forward ones from this point of view. Those physicians who are objectors exist in all regions, center-right, center-left, in the north and in the south. In the Emilia-Romagna region, we know that some brave and important choices were made. What would you like to say with that respect? Let's start off from the useless question. All of the comrades in my trade union called me Madam Secretary with the feminine title. And now, I still call her with the female title, and if the Prime Minister will accept that, it's her own problem. No president of the no Prime Minister will make me change my mind. If you don't want to see the difference in between the males and female titles, entails a need to become type approved. And this, I think, leads to a weakness and is the sign of a weakness. And this is, for example, once you go past the ceiling of the maneuver, the economic maneuver, then that's your problem. And that maneuver, as Alessandra said, maybe this is not what will make newspaper headlines, but I think that that also hides a misogynist stand or position. Let me just make an example. One was Opzione Donna. The second example is the announcement that was given by the Prime Minister, whereby she was allowing for 1 extra month of parental leave. It's not just an increased parental leave. It's just an increase in the money paid for that parental leave. And once again, she's stating that dealing with children is a matter for women. And once again, we go back in time. And another theme is mandatory paternity, which seems to be disappearing from the political agenda. And then we have other budgetary laws, which are truly annoying because they have so many items and hidden items contained. And in past times, I was highly criticized by many because of something which is by now in the backbone of the budgetary law, which is the lack of contribution in case of new hirings and tax deductions. And it is envisaged that one limitation is the permanent job. And in the case of permanent jobs, that was also allowing for temporary jobs. And no one seems to be remembering that there was something which was a fundamental aspect, whereby that was also the vehicle of voluntary part-time and of a poor kind of solution for women, adopted in the case of women, and including women. And whenever we consider occasional or temporary jobs, which is hitting only a series of sectors and seems to be released in an area where there is the highest level of female work. I believe that all this brings us back to a very serious topic. This is a true regression, an organized backwardness, going back in time. And the center-left was really not doing much in terms of the applicability of the law 194. And I think that this was also true of many other movements which decided or tried to protect that law. There was a law allowing the hiring of hospital physicians because that was only for non-objecting physicians. So there are some effects whereby some rules were changing. And I know that some of the militants of the movement in the Umbria, Marche or Piedmontese regions, day after day, report violations that happen and that take place in breach of the rules, even the ones decided by the Conte II government. Sometimes in the cases of abortion cases or abortion pills. And I believe that it is quite obvious that there is an ongoing regression. Maybe this is not going to be done in a very visible manner. I know that the Prime Minister is an expert politician. She knows that she should not trigger a frontal clash. And probably she will just not adopt any orientations so as not to allow for any boycotting of this rule. But I will use models that stand for the worst poison that is available to us. And time after time, they will lead to the idea that maybe the women should better stay at home and give birth to children. Why should they ever be elsewhere? Because their work is somehow less relevant. And there is a debate going back to the economic maneuver, and no one mentions that, but in there we see that the independence and self-determination of women is not relevant. And in the absence of economic autonomy, there is no self-determination. So the whole set of a number of factors make it so that we have to conduct a very difficult action, looking at them one by one, never neglect them, never think that they may be less important because there is always something more important, and then try and see what needs to be done in terms of changes. And I believe that the battles and fights in cases that seem to be for a minority always led people to think that the contribution of female workers are less respectable than the ones provided by male workers. That's why there is a pension treatment which is different in between the two genders, because you are being discriminated if you have or if you don't have children, if you are a caregiver or if you are not a caregiver, if you have a given percentage of maternity leaves, and they allow you to have access to given rights only if you're going to be fired, then that means that maybe we should try and stay away from possible discriminations inside the condition enjoyed by the workers, female workers, because they are already discriminated somehow, and we wouldn't want to have any further discrimination. In general, this is something that pertains to the labor world, and I wouldn't want to add any further components in that sense. Last comment, what needs to be done? Well, the center left in all of its articulation was met by many difficulties in doing given things. And what we need to do is to bring together civil rights and civil rights, because they are not separate worlds. And we can't just talk of the ones without dealing with the others. And this is what probably brought forward and allowed for the idea in a labor world which was met by difficulties, and which allowed for the idea of having been neglected and never become visible by the policies, or never have visibility in the political arena. So we have to consider women and workers, female workers, are there. They live in a world that needs visibility, a world which needs rights. Rights to be respected, and that the social condition should also be viewed and considered. So this is the very crux of the matter. So it is very difficult to do all this nowadays, because the right which is governing, which is a social right movement, is the right that intercepted the elements of distrust and of dissatisfaction existing within the society. And the separation of rights, or the conceiving separate rights, is what will bring about the non-relevance of the many battles that we will want to fight, maybe, or that we will intend to participate into. Benedetto della Vedova. Senator Camusso was saying something whereby someone like you, who has been living in the Radical Party and knowing that you looked at it as a situation that needs to be overcome, I think that this is a great result. And I did recall this recently, together with Gianni Cooperlo. Now, obviously, I wouldn't want to go into a debate which would involve only Mrs. Camusso, but obviously we are here considering the risk of the Radical Party being a mass party. And Emma Bonino said, well, if only that could be. This is something which exists, and that in the center-left alliance and coalition sees you very much involved, especially in the confirmation of this political step having to do with civil rights, not seen as an alternative, but rather as something which is supplementing all rights. And if we just conceive the figure of the woman as a weak figure, or as a citizen having her children at school, but deprived of her Italian citizenship, and defining abortion as only as a civil right is also something which is very much on the social side of the problem, and the possibility of not resorting to any other alternatives rather than the ones allowed by the law. But now let's approach this issue from a different side. You have been performing as the Undersecretary with the Foreign Ministry, and you had a proxy for human rights, which right now sees a gap. There was no confirmation of that role. Yes, that's true. As far as I know, I do not know that there are any other proxies reconfirmed, and I do hope that there are going to be, but a specific proxy seems not to exist in that sense, especially as far as human rights policies are concerned. And I would like to say that the Foreign Ministry, during the Draghi mandate, did place the focus on the theme of human rights. And let me just mention a couple of episodes. This is one of the very few countries where the foreign minister was appointing a special envoy for LGBT rights in the world, that is Minister Petri. And I do hope, honestly, that this is going to be a choice that is going to be confirmed also by this next government. Now, as Italian government, we were successful in a different field, with a different initiative. We could obtain for the setting up of a special rapporteur of the United Nations for the rights in Afghanistan, human rights in Afghanistan. And as we know, this is a very special rapporteur. That means that this is not a figure, not at least the figure we were hoping to have in terms of the role to be performed or the activities to be performed. But nonetheless, that was an important signal, because it did put the focus on Richard Bennett, which is an international focus placed on international human rights, the special rapporteur limitations, one of which is not having a full-fledged fact-finding mission. So I do hope that this government as well is going to be looking at the Italian foreign policy, putting the accent on a cross-sectional elements, human rights in this sense, and consider them as priority aspects in the framework of international policies and politics. But as far as the role to be played by the Italian Parliament, what I think is that there are some specific elements with respect to which the Parliament should be working. And in the governmental framework, at the time of the previous legislation, we tried to achieve the setting up of an independent body on human rights, which Italy unfortunately doesn't have, and that's a very serious matter. I believe that Italy and Malta are the only two countries not setting up such a independent national commission on human rights, without depriving anything from other commissions, without barring any other activities from other commissions, whether them be temporary commissions or standing commissions, and without wanting to take away anything from UNAR, a highly qualified agency at United Nations level. And in the end, when we understood that the government was going to fall with the Undersecretary, Mr. Amendola, we tried to use European laws, especially where there was a European benchmark with respect to which we were sort of backward. And I do honestly hope that things will proceed positively with this next government. And as Susanna Camuso was also saying, and we will know that those who have a radical culture, a radical origin or root, knows that civil rights are social rights, because the many discriminations that take place when civil rights are deprived and are barred, whether the theme be abortion or surrogated maternity, or in the case of adoptions, well, all that usually is detrimental to the weakest brackets, society brackets, and those who can afford it can still travel abroad and obtain whatever they look for. But if you live in a state where some freedoms are not granted, where some rights, freedom rights are not granted, then we have to accept the fact that we are lacking the freedom of movement, of living a full life, of conceiving a life, or of having a family. Now, I believe that with this respect, it's going to be hard to make any progress because, had Stefania Craxi been here, probably I would say that the sum of Fratelli d'Italia and of Forza Italia is a reactionary force. They have a reactionary view of life and of individual freedom, the one enjoyed by people. Now, even whenever we talk about the currency, they express a reactionary culture. The idea that we have to regret past times, which weren't good times, honestly, especially as far as civil rights are concerned, and that's a past time that is gone for good, and hopefully it will never come back. But let me end with a conclusion, with a consideration. Now, I work in the Foreign Commission, but I think that the national parliaments and even the European Parliament, which is conducting an excellent work on human rights, it has always done so, but I believe that national parliaments, and here I'm referring to European countries, well, national parliaments perform and have a fundamental role in stimulating their own governments, because starting from the Italian government, all governments should be aware of this extraordinary, dramatic moment that we are living, a season which is a highly dramatic one, which is shared by world countries. We see that in Iran, in the squares of Iran, in what is left of Ukrainian squares. We see that in the testimony of the Belarus representatives. We see that in the Chinese streets, where the demonstrations and the marches are immediately harnessed, and those demonstrations probably are just expressing a baseline fundamental freedoms, basic freedoms, resting upon freedom and independent people, autonomous people. And I believe that as MPs and as representative of our parliaments, we have to keep high the vision. There are different aspects and different facets that have got to do with Italian policy, domestic affairs, justice, social affairs. But this is a very extraordinary moment, the one that we are living today, the one we are experiencing today. There are so many political analysts, social analysts, who start saying, friends, democratic friends, we should all acknowledge the fact that the many difficulties we encounter in our countries that rest upon some freedoms, the freedom to criticize, the freedom to think, which we thought belonged to pastimes, to the dawn of freedom, and so much so that we do not understand the dawn of freedom existing in other countries such as Iran. This is obviously a political vision. Nonetheless, we are to be aware that this is an extraordinary moment, an exceptional moment. Even the World Championships held in Qatar never brought about a debate on human rights, social rights, human rights, the working and labor rights. Not that I remember, at least, there ever was a worldwide sports event that could catalyze billions of viewers, where the human right theme could stand as a central element. And we know that, unfortunately, everything depends on money, and money is the oil thrown into the gears to make them move. And so we have to challenge this reactionary right movement, which was standing united in the previous legislation, and we have to still challenge them. And this has to be, if not just a national, at least an international commitment. We should still push our government, in this case, so as not to fall back upon ourselves and just retrench ourselves into a sovereign dynamic, a reactionary dynamic. We have to find the ways, the tools, the means, as European Union, and I'm not just saying this because of a sense of duty with respect to our host, but we have to stand on the side of these people that fight and that die because of a fight. And they, after all, are telling us that in Russia, in China, in Iran, they explain to us that their own hope is the one of living in countries that are similar to ours from this point of view, similar to Europe. And in the middle, we know that there is Canada, United States, and many more other countries. And in terms of human rights and respect of human rights, the Ukrainian resistance and the willingness to resist, the willingness demonstrated by people of looking at Europe as something which could stand as a possible alternative to their own current life. And it is not just by chance that a Russian patriarch, Mr. Kirill, when having to find a stigma to blame the Ukrainian society in order to try and explain this incredible war, this violent war, was using the example of human rights and civil rights, meaning that we are to go there, destroy Ukraine, because that is where gay pride is held. And there is a law that prevents adults from promoting sexual behaviors that are not traditional. But then we know that young people from the US, in this case, but also in Iran, will not tolerate any future life limitations. So we have to stand by them. We have to embrace their causes. And we have to be close to them somehow and take their sides.
Grazie, Benedetto della Vedova.
Thank you. If Stefania Craxi is not here with us, we can end this a little early. So we thank Senator Majorino, Senator Camusso, Benedetto della Vedova, Alessandro Zan, and Member of Parliament Elena Bonetti. Thank you.